10 interesting stories that will surprise even history lovers Part 2. The sixth story about America's first supermodel who died in a psychiatric hospital. Audrey Munson wasn't just a supermodel. She became a cult star of the Gilded Age, proving herself as a model, and film actress. In fact, she was the model for some of New York's most iconic sculptures, including a massive 8-meter statue mounted on the roof of a Manhattan municipal building, Civic Glory. Munson was born in Rochester, New York in 1891. She moved to New York as a teenager. She was spotted by a photographer at a store on Fifth Avenue. This marked the beginning of Munson's collaboration with various photographers and sculptors, who were attracted by her photogenic and neoclassical features. A little later, Munson also began acting in silent films. Despite her fame, Munson was unable to save enough money to ensure a comfortable existence after her star went out. By the 1920s, her popularity had declined, and she was forced to move with her mother to upstate New York. There she got a job as a waitress. It was during this period that she began to show signs of mental illness. She insisted that she was Baroness Audrey Mary Munson. She blamed the Jewish people for her downfall, and her outspoken anti-Semitism led her to ask the House of Representatives to create a law that would protect her from Jews. At the age of 40, Munson moved to Ogdensburg, located near the Canadian border. There she was admitted to St. Lawrence Hospital, where she lived for many years. At the end of her life, Munson was moved to a nearby nursing home to make room for new patients. Eventually, she ended up back at St. Lawrence Hospital, where she died at the age of 104. The seventh story is about perhaps the richest man who has ever lived on planet Earth. Mansa Musa is perhaps the richest man who has ever lived on Earth. He is rarely remembered, mainly because he was originally from Africa, the study of which is not given enough attention. Musa became emperor of Mali in 1312 through the trade in gold and salt, which were found in abundance in West Africa. Musa amassed a huge fortune. The world learned about Musa's fabulous wealth after he made a pilgrimage to Mecca. His caravan consisted of 60,000 people, dozens of animals, and a huge amount of gold, which Musa and his entourage simply distributed to people on the streets. They purchased so many goods that they shook the world economy for a while, because they significantly increased the amount of gold in circulation. Musa spent his gold on building mosques. According to one legend, during his reign, he built one mosque every Friday. The most famous mosque he built is the Gingerbread Cathedral Mosque in Timbuktu, Mali. Translated into modern money, Musa's fortune is believed to have been estimated at about $400 billion. The only person who came close to Musa's wealth was John Rockefeller, who, according to economists, accumulated about $336 billion adjusted for inflation. The eighth story is about a Mormon girl raised by Mojave. Olivia Oatman was born in 1837. She grew up with her brothers and sisters in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and she was destined to be at the center of one of the most interesting stories of the American West. In 1850, when Olivia was only 13 years old, her parents joined the Mormons who traveled by train through California. On the way, the Oatmans were attacked by members of the Western Yavapai tribe, as a result of which Olivia's parents were killed. Olivia herself was captured. The Yavapai kept her as a slave in a nearby village, where she was forced to work for food and carry firewood. If Olivia did not obey, she was often beaten. A year later, Olivia was exchanged for a horse, and she ended up in the Mojave tribe. Its representatives were more prosperous than the Yavapai, and, fortunately for Olivia, showed more compassion towards her. Olivia was given a plot of land for farming, and was also given traditional Mojave clothing. She also had tattoos on her chin and arms. It was a custom that concerned all new members of the tribe. When Olivia turned 19, an envoy arrived from Fort Yuma in the village of Mojave, who said that white people were demanding the girls return to them. Fearing that white people would destroy them, the Mojave brought Olivia to Fort Yuma, where she was given normal clothes, since it was considered unacceptable in Western society to wear a skirt without a top. Olivia's reintegration into European society lasted several years. Afterwards, she always fondly recalled her time spent in the Mojave tribe. The ninth story is about a man who revolutionized medicine, but was criticized for it. Ignaz Philipp Semmelweis was a doctor who made a huge medical breakthrough that remains relevant to this day. However, at the time, he was subjected to merciless criticism and ridicule because of his ideas. In 1847, Semmelweis was working in a Vienna maternity hospital, where he began to notice an alarming trend. Newly minted mothers were dying en masse due to a mysterious disease known as puerperal fever. Dr. Semmelweis decided to find out what was behind these deaths. He soon discovered that women who were delivered by ordinary doctors died 5 times more often than those who gave birth with the help of midwives. Semmelweis realized that the difference between doctors and midwives was that doctors, in addition to delivering babies, also performed autopsies on corpses. And very often they immediately switched from one procedure to another. Dr. Semmelweis suggested that doctors infected the patients of the maternity ward with various infections. He came to the conclusion that the end of this practice would help get rid of the puerperal fever. Semmelweis was also the first to introduce disinfection measures. He mainly used chemical chlorine. After the adoption of the decree that maternity wards should be kept clean and that doctors should wash their hands before performing procedures, mortality from puerperal fever has sharply decreased. Despite the fact that disinfection reduced the death rate to 1%, Semmelweis's methods were rejected by most doctors of the time because they found the requirement to wash their hands too offensive. Constant harassment by the medical community led to Semmelweis having a nervous breakdown, and he was placed in a mental hospital, where he eventually died in 1865. The irony of his death is that, according to most historians, he died of sepsis. The 10th story about a prostitute turned into a pirate queen. Qin was born in 1775. She lived in Guangdong province in southeastern China and worked as a prostitute in a floating brothel. In 1801, the famous Zheng Yi, captain of the pirate fleet Red Flag, attacked a brothel. He was amazed by Xi's beauty and asked her to marry him. She agreed only after he promised her to ensure an equal partnership in the leadership of the fleet, as well as to give 50% of the production. 6 years later, Zheng Yi died, and she inherited a pirate fleet of 400 ships. She continued to plunder cities on the South China coast. Under Xi's leadership, the pirate fleet sank 63 Chinese government ships, so British and Portuguese sailors tried to stay away from her. 3 years after she took over the Red Flag, the emperor, seeing no other alternative, offered amnesty to anyone who wished to abandon the pirate path and return to the mainland. Then she resumed her normal life. She married the former pirate Pao. Together they returned to Guangdong province, where she opened a gambling house. She died in 1844.